What's going on, everybody? Khalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Motorola Moto G 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 81.4%. With the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 405, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 85.4%. So while the display with the Moto G 5G isn't bad, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G does have a huge advantage here. The display technology is a lot better, and with the Super AMOLED you're going to get brighter and bolder colors, and the viewing angles are also going to be a lot better as well. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is going to be a lot easier to see than the Moto G 5G. In addition to this, of course, with the 1080p resolution, the A53 5G is going to have a sharper image, and this tends to be a good thing when you're consuming a lot of content. And finally, with a 120Hz refresh rate versus a 90Hz, the movement on the screen with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. Now this is probably going to be the most subtle difference, and you probably can't even tell in this video, but when you're actually using the phones, if you're doing a lot of stuff that has motion on the screen, like watching videos and playing games, in general you will get a better experience with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Now for storage, with the Moto G 5G, we're getting 256GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now keep in mind there's another variant of the A53 5G that does have 256GB too, but this specific phone in my hand is the 128GB variant. And of course, another thing to keep in mind is that with the A53 5G, the 256GB variant is of course going to be a little bit more expensive, whereas with the Moto G 5G, the 256GB variant of this phone, which is factory unlocked by the way, is already going to be a little bit less expensive than the 128GB variant of the A53 5G. So definitely something to think about there. But in general, I do think both of these phones do have a good amount of storage. Of course, if you're really a power user, if you have a bunch of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, then 256GB is probably going to be a little better for you. But honestly, for the average user, 128GB should be perfectly fine. I mean, even for my personal phone, I have an iPhone 13 with 128GB, and of course, iPhones don't even have microSD card expansion, and I haven't had any storage issues myself. And while I know there are probably a lot of people out there who need more space than I do, I feel like I am more of an average user. So again, I would say for most people, 128GB, especially with microSD card expansion, should be perfectly fine. But that being said, of course, if you do want more storage, in this specific comparison, the Moto G 5G will have an advantage. But again, don't forget, if you really do want a Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, but you do need more storage, there is another variant that does have 256GB, and because of this, the advantage the Moto G 5G has isn't really that huge. Now for security features, both these phones do have fingerprint scanners. With the Moto G 5G, it's right here on the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, it's right here on the display. So it definitely looks nice and premium. And aside from the fingerprint scanners, both phones have face unlock as well. But starting with the Moto G 5G, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And moving on to the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues there. And remember, both phones also do have face unlock, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Moto G 5G, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we got pretty much the same design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 5 megapixel macro camera, and a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera. For video, the Moto G 5G has a max quality of 1080p at 30 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, and the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G has a max quality of 4K at 30 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras. So in both features and quality, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G has a huge advantage here, while the Moto G 5G will get the job done if you're more of a casual camera user and you just want to get a couple nice photos here and there. The Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is really on a whole nother level, so if you're taking a lot of photos, you want a wider variety of features, and you want to get the highest quality you can between the two, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G will definitely be the way to go. This is especially the case with video, because again, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G can record in 4K, whereas the Moto G 5G can only record in 1080p. Now as far as RAM and processor go, with the Moto G 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. With the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM as well, with the Samsung Exynos 1280. Now keep in mind, with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, just like with the storage, there is another variant of this phone that has 8GB of RAM, but again, this specific phone in this video does have 6GB of RAM. Now that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and with the Moto G 5G, we're getting a single core score of 545 and a multi-core score of 1684. And with the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, we're getting a single core score of 742 and a multi-core score of 1910. So as you can see here, there is a bit of a difference. And when it comes to performance, in my experience, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is significantly better. So if you're doing higher end activities like mobile gaming, for example, or you're just going to be on your phone a lot, you will get a better experience with the A53 5G. But on the other hand, for what it is, the Moto G 5G is really not a slow phone. The MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor is definitely a good processor, and if you're just doing basic activities like web browsing, social media, and that kind of thing, you're really not going to go wrong with the Moto G 5G either. But what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of which phone will be a more appropriate upgrade for you. You might find that even though the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is clearly the faster phone of the two, the Moto G 5G might be a good enough upgrade already. But again, in general, both phones are definitely decently fast, and for the average user, for basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming stuff like videos and music, and playing the occasional game or two, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone. Now both of these phones do have 5000 mAh batteries, so you can expect to get great battery life and longevity with both of them. But the difference here is that with the Moto G 5G, this phone supports 10W fast charging, whereas the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G supports 25W fast charging. Now this isn't really going to make a huge difference to everyone. It really depends on how you're actually using your phone. If you leave your phone plugged in all day, or you don't have a fast charger, you're not even going to notice. But for me personally, I use this 60W charger that came with my MacBook, and I can definitely say the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G charges up quite a bit faster than the Moto G 5G. I mean, this phone can go from 20% to 100% in less than an hour, whereas with the Moto G 5G, while it doesn't exactly charge slow, it does take quite a bit longer. So if you do care about charging speeds, then the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G will have an advantage, but if you don't, then as far as the battery goes, you're really not going to go wrong with either of these phones. As far as other features go, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G does have NFC, whereas the Moto G 5G doesn't have NFC. So if making contactless mobile payments using tap and pay is important to you, then the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G will be the way to go. Now another thing I want to point out that you probably already noticed by now is the Moto G 5G is not the same phone as the Moto G Stylus 5G, and as you can see, this phone does not have a stylus. This is a completely different phone, so definitely keep that in mind. But that being said, one thing the Moto G 5G does have that the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G doesn't is a headphone jack. So as you can see here, the Moto G 5G does have a 3.5mm headphone jack, whereas with Samsung, unfortunately, they did do away with that feature. So if you do have a regular pair of 3.5mm wired headphones, and you don't want to get an adapter, then the Moto G 5G will have a bit of an advantage. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, I would say in pretty much every way, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is a much better device. The display quality is a lot better with a 1080p resolution versus 720p, and having a Super AMOLED display instead of an IPS LCD is going to give the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G much better looking colors, and again, the viewing angles are so much better. And even if you're not outside in the sun, even if you're just in a brighter area, or anywhere for that matter, the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is going to be so much easier to see. And in general, if you're consuming a lot of content, whether you're watching videos, playing games, or even just looking at photos, everything is going to look significantly better on the Samsung Galaxy A53 A53 5G. The A53 5G also has a much better camera setup that not only has an ultra-wide camera while the Moto G 5G doesn't, but also takes much higher quality photos and can record videos in 4K. In addition to this, the A53 5G is significantly faster, supports better fast charging, and has NFC, so you can use tap and pay with this phone. But on the other hand, like I said before, the Moto G 5G is a little bit more affordable. It does have a headphone jack, whereas unfortunately, for whatever reason, Samsung decided to take that feature away with the A53 5G. And in addition to this, the unlocked version of the Moto G 5G has double the storage at 256GB of internal storage versus 128 with the more common model of the A53 5G. So in general, while the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G is going to be the better choice for most people, the Moto G 5G is definitely not a bad phone either, especially if you can get a good deal for it. But this concludes my comparison between the Motorola Moto G 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability, because this is always changing. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.